With the Jewish holiday starting this evening, there are some absences, so it is being recorded. Even though all my classes are recorded for the Villanova site, this one is recorded for the law school site. I'm not sure it'll make a difference on how I handle it, but maybe I should stay near here. But we'll have the video. So anyway, people listening that aren't here, you're here in spirit. So we got some really interesting stuff. And I will say this right off the bat. We are now in week 4 of the commissioner study. As I've talked to you before, as I've talked to my fellows, this class could be the entire semester could be on commissioner power in sports. Such a vibrant topic with things happening every week. And it'd probably be a lot of fun to teach that course. But we will try to wrap it up today in terms of this specific section of the course because there's so much else to get to, primarily about the historical aspects of sports law, going into the basis, the beginnings of things like the reserve clause, really leading up to the seminal cases in sports law like the Curt Flood decision in the Supreme Court, like some of the circuit court decisions we'll see on free agency, on what can and can't be done with player rights and owner rights, and all kinds of issues beyond that. Getting into Title IX, getting into concussions, all these different kinds of things. But as I said, we are in a time and place in sports where power, if you will, control, maybe is a better word, over personal behavior, off-field behavior, and on-field behavior is at a peak. And we will talk about, we'll continue our discussion, which we've been having now for weeks, about where's the line that should be crossed or not when it comes to oversight of players primarily, but these past couple weeks, and as we'll start today, oversight of teams, oversight of management decisions. Okay, so we have this pyramid in sports that starts way down at the grassroots level and works all the way up to the commissioner. And the question is, what is the proper amount of oversight? As we go through the semester, then it's the question of what's the proper balance in rights between athletes and their superiors. Overarching all of that is what is the role of the commissioner? Because ultimately there are going to be rules. Rules that teams have, rules that associations have, rules that leagues have. But within those rules, teams and players will get into disputes. That's the nature of the business. But what about the commissioner? What about this person that is the CEO, that is the head of the sport, that is the face of the sport? Like the article I wrote this week that I sent to you about Roger Goodell, the face of the sport, for good and for bad. The bad is he gets all the heat when things go wrong. The good is, as you see, he's going to continue to make whatever, $35, $40 million a year. Where is the line to cross? And so to review, what we've seen in our cases so far is the line's pretty broad, starting with the first commissioner, Judge Landis, and the catchphrases that are going to be dominant through the course, such as best interests, are interpreted pretty broadly. Best interests. But you, as a future sports lawyer, have to figure out, what does that mean? What does best interests of the game mean? And is it, as I wrote about with Goodell, is it really best interests of ownership and revenue production? Or is it best interests of players? Or in the ideal utopic world, best interests of the game? The game. Okay? You want to run a sport, what are you looking at? Are you looking at revenue production? Are you looking at marketing? Are you looking at television ratings? Are you looking at health and safety? All those things have to work. The question is, where's your priority? What we've seen with recent years in sports, it seems like a lot of the priority on the management level has been revenue production. And a lot of priority on the player level, at least in football, has been health and safety. So where is that priority for you? And if you're a leader in sports, where do you put your time in? What's the real issue for you? Okay, now, commissioners have gotten involved on the team side. That's where we started last week. That's where we'll continue today. The Finley case was a major case, and basically a commissioner stepping in on a trade and saying, no, it's not in the best interest of the game. By weakening that team, the Oakland A's, he's hurting the best interest of the game. And lo and behold, he won the case. The commissioner power was as broad as it's ever been in stopping a trade. We talked about that happening today. Can it happen today? Of course. I mean, it sounds so preposterous. We've seen the Florida Marlins win championships, sell off their best players, reload, win championship, sell off their best players. We see it in a lot of sports where teams go young. Now we hear talk about teams like the New York Jets tanking. Well, what does that mean? Because they're playing young players? Now, would the commissioner step in if they traded whoever their best players were? We don't think so. So on the team aspect, I think commissioners should give an extraordinary amount of deference to team decisions. That's what these people are hired to do. And then, of course, we talked about the Chris Paul case with the New Orleans Hornets in this unique, truly unique setting where the NBA owned them for a while in receivership, and therefore David Stern, the commissioner, acted to void the trade in his role as owner, he says, more than the commissioner. We all have our cynicism about that. Chris Paul could have been a Laker. The rest of the NBA history could be different. He stopped that. He was fine letting him go to the Clippers. Now we talk about, in the Chris Paul segue, what happens when players align? And this has been the story in the NBA the past 5 years. What happens when players, we're not talking about tanking, we're talking about the opposite, right? So not when the Oakland A's are selling off their best players, not when the New Orleans Hornets are decimating their team, not when teams go young and build towards the future. Now we talk about the opposite. Okay? 2010, LeBron James, the biggest name in sports, goes with his buddy Dwayne Wade. They get this guy Bosch. They form what the first thing we've ever seen called a super team. Did the league step in? No. Kevin Durant did the same thing a year ago. Did the league step in? No. Did anyone even suggest the commissioner should step in? Well, perhaps, yeah. That would have been the opposite of what Bowie Kuhn and David Stern did in the past. Now, again, if you're going to make the argument that what happened with these teams going bad should be legislated by the commissioner, you have to kind of think about the converse, which is this. In the best interest of the game, should they step in and stop this? To this point, it hasn't happened. Now, this is a unique sport, right? Obviously, 5 players on the field at the same time, or the court, and what power they bring. You know, a player like LeBron James, a player like Kevin Durant. I've formed this friendship now with Sam Hinkie. Remember him? He has this belief that superstars in basketball are like, if you compare it to football, they're like the quarterback, the coach, the owner combined into one. That's what a superstar in basketball is. They are everything. And your goal in basketball is to get one of these. And oh my God, what if you can get 2? And oh my God, what if you can get 3? That's how you build a sustainable success in the sport. Well, it's happening. Now, this is all fun to talk about, right? This is like sports radio stuff. The issue for us, should a commissioner, someone legislating the sport in the best interest of the game, get involved, void it? Because they can. They can do whatever they want. There's no rules against a commissioner stopping a trade or a signing. Again, when you have 2 or 3 more stars, this is happening. So, just sort of open it up here. Any thoughts on the commissioner, what he or she should or shouldn't do with this? Yeah, Jack.
I don't really think that a commissioner should punish an organization for trying to win to the best of their ability. So if they're finding a way to get as much talent to their city, to their organization, franchise, then that's really not anything that they should apologize for. So maybe if they were to do something, it would probably be kind of on the other end, but I'm not really sure how that would work either.
Well, is the commissioner responsible for competitive balance? And I guess the question is, how would they achieve that? I'll ask it this way. Does anyone think the commissioner should step in on these things? Do people like the idea of super teams? Yeah.
I personally don't like it. I think it's pushing me away from the sport, but I think as a commissioner and his power, kind of the legal side of things, I believe it's not his position to, overstep his boundaries and direct teams to do things. I think it's like, for me, it's a marketing kind of question. Is it a business type? Is it promoting the league? Is it successful in viewership? If it is, then you let it go. But if it does have a negative impact, that's maybe when he takes his legal kind of power and steps in and says, okay, this is the time we, cut this out.
If you are an NBA fan and you feel like you know who already is going to be in the finals like the past 2 years, does that harm your interest in the sport? Yeah.
I think it actually added to the interest, at least recently.
Well, it adds to the off-season interest. There's no question.
Yeah, I think it can add to the in-season interest too. Back before I was born, you hear about like Celtics and Lakers going at it every season, basically. I don't think the commissioner ever stepped in then, but I would like to get to experience something like that too. So I think it has to be done.
Now, if you're a fan of a team without one of these superstars, are you less interested in the sport? If you see your team having no chance? And maybe that's the issue. Does the super teams have the effect of giving half the league no chance? And do we care? I mean, ultimately, you guys have used the word marketing. I mean, this has been good for ratings, and it has been good for discussion. It's not been good for smaller market teams. Yes? Right. So what do you make of that statement?
I think he basically changed his opinion and now sees them as a good thing for the league.
Okay. And again, this is league versus team. If you're the owner of pick a team, the Detroit Pistons, and you don't see yourself having a chance, that's a problem. I guess it always comes down to the players, and they have choices they can make. Yeah, Khalil.
It's almost gone to the point where you almost hope that your team doesn't have a chance if you don't have LeBron now, right? So you can just be young and get the number one pick. It's like, who wants to be the Charlotte Hornets, like maybe the 7th seed, create my beloved Nets that they're still doing stuff. But I don't know. Maybe eventually with a lot of young players,
Right.
they'll trust the process. Like, be good again. So it's almost like you're rooting against your team if you don't have LeBron James.
Okay, so it serves to do exactly what these other owners want to, the commissioner did step in on. It serves to incentivize tanking, right? Because everyone wants to get one of these guys. And the only way to get one of these guys, not the only way, is what the Sixers have done, which is stink and get very high picks. And obviously you have to be right on that. Jason.
I think the league has done a good job trying to protect the small market teams because, teams, they have bird rights for players, the supermax deals, so they want to incentivize guys to stay with their hometown team that they were drafted. But a report came out yesterday and it showed a ton of NBA teams lost money last year. And it's really hard to tell, Paul George or Kevin Durant stay in Oklahoma City or Indianapolis when next year you can go to New York or LA or somewhere where the market is going to greatly exceed anything you would make from your contract. So I don't really think there's kind of an option for Adam Silver in the league. They can keep trying to play with the money, but.
Yeah, I mean, what we haven't got into collective bargaining, what Jason's hinting at is the league has tried to address this. And it all came from LeBron forming that team in Miami in 2010. In the collective bargaining agreement 2011 and the one just in 2016, there are incentives of tens of millions of dollars, tens of millions, for players to stay where they are as free agents. So you get to the end of your contract with that team, and you could pick a number, $150 million with a new team, but $200 million with your old team because there's going to be salary cap relief, there's going to be an ability to sign you longer. All these ways of incentivizing superstars to stay with their teams. Here's the problem. Players know this and are still leaving. Agents know this and are still leaving. And Durant is the obvious example. Could have made so much more money staying in Oklahoma. So much more. $40 million, $50 million? Okay, because as a free agent, you're limited to number of years. As an incumbent player, you're not. As an incumbent player, you get X percentage of the salary cap per year max. As a free agent, you get a lesser percentage max. So you go to Kevin Durant, and you're forming a legal system, a collective bargaining agreement, so a guy like Kevin Durant has just amazing financial incentive to stay in Oklahoma. Forget even beyond all the relationships he's developed, all the fan base he's had, all the community stuff he's done. But he leaves. So then you're back to the drawing board as a commissioner saying, what can we do? What can we do to stop these? And if we can't, how do we sell it? I think the real constituency for that is, how do we sell it to owners, teams, and fan bases of the other 20 teams that can't compete? How do we sell that? Because we can sell it, I think, nationally to an audience. The NBA has been doing great. Now, Jason mentioned some individual team finances, but I mean, the television deals are incredible. It seems like your generation, younger people, are so invested in the NBA right now, probably because of Bleacher Report videos like that. It's become cool. It's become something to talk about. Players seem more accessible, more I don't know what the word is, cool than NBA, NFL players. So they're doing something right. But if you're a commissioner, again, you've got to think about precedent. You've got to think about where does this lead us? Are we eventually, even though it's not going to be a literal relegation like soccer, are we eventually getting to that? Are we getting to Warriors, Cavs, and a few others, and then relegation? Everyone else just kind of playing to see what happens. And even if you accept that, is that okay? Because as was said here, he heard about Lakers Celtics back in the day. And then, you'll tell your grandchildren about Cavs Warriors. Is that so bad? Well, I don't know. I do know this. We're going to talk at some point about collusion. Collusion's a very pejorative word. And it's very pejorative for the management side. Leagues and teams cannot collude. Because this is sort of the Kaepernick story. Can teams and leagues collude to have some kind of concerted effort? In Kaepernick's case, is there collusion to keep him out? I don't think there is, but people are arguing that. But here's the thing, collusion is not outlawed on the player side, right? So somehow, some way, LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh all had contracts coming up at the same time, got together as friends, they're buddies, and said, let's do this. The Miami Heat cleared out their team, had one player under contract, and did it. It was complete collusion. But it's allowed. Players, you can't legislate players getting together as friends and talking. So collusion is a weird word. It's used in this negative sense of teams getting together and saying, let's not sign this guy, or let's keep money down. But it really is something that happens at every level in sports by the player side. And that's what's been happening. So last summer, Durant goes to a rented house at the Hamptons, and these team contingents come in groveling with their hundreds of millions of dollars. One thing we talk every class about is power. Power of commissioner, power of leagues, power of teams. Oh my God, what was that? That was player power. We haven't seen that. Now, LeBron 7 years ago, yeah, but this was unbelievable. He sat in a house in the Hamptons with his agent and his buddies, and these teams came in, and the Celtics brought Tom Brady, and these teams are just groveling, putting together massive PowerPoints, putting together massive video displays. And those were only the teams he invited. If he opened it up, every team would have been there, right? So that's power. And the Warriors brought all those guys. They brought them. Why not, right? Came off vacations in Hawaii, whatever it was. They all came. I'm sure somebody tried to bring whoever, Obama. They would have brought anyone. That's power. I talked to someone who talked to someone with one of those presentations. They were pissed off because Durant is hardly listening. He's on his phone. Or he's taking a call from someone else while the team, again, is groveling to pay him $200 million. This is the power. And I don't think commissioners ever envisioned this. Now, do I think they should stop this from happening? I don't know. I don't know what else they can do. Because money is not driving this. For superstars, they have so much money, they're not going to worry about an extra $30 million. That sounds preposterous to us, but Kevin Durant's making $200 million on a shoe deal. So he wants to play with the best guys. So the Celtics bring Tom Brady. He's like, yeah, all right. Thanks for coming. These other teams bring whatever celebrities they can. It's not working. And poor Oklahoma. I got to say that. Poor Oklahoma. What do? Once he decided to go sit in this house in the Hamptons, I told everyone, that's it, they're done. They're done. He's not going back to Oklahoma. That's over. You don't listen to these presentations and go back to Oklahoma. There's no way. And he had plenty of chances to sign there an extension. Now, Oklahoma keeps the other guy, Westbrook. That is a huge deal for them because the natural reaction was, okay, he leaves. Well, he hasn't left, at least for another year, right? But if he leaves, no one's going there. No one's going there. So then, I think then the commissioner really has to figure this thing out because the goal of every sports league is integrity. The goal of every sport is getting an investment from the public where you're like, this is good. I'm willing to invest my time here. I want this product. And if you're in Oklahoma City and that guy leaves next year and turns down what Durant did, tens of millions of dollars just to stay, more than he could get anywhere else, you've got to look around and say, we're done. Our only chance is getting a Westbrook or Durant through the draft, and our only chance of doing that is to really stink. Now, it's working supposedly here, right? But it took a long time in Philly. The Sam Hinkie strategy is that. It's like this is the strategy in 5, 6 words, whatever this is. There is no reward for mediocrity. Zero. And some people have that view of life too. There is no reward for mediocrity. So in team management, you have to bring it down to the studs. You have to tear it down and hope for these transcendent players to come to you. Okay? That's it. So again, what I'm trying to say, if you're a commissioner of this sport, which is unique, you've got to figure out a way to keep interest beyond the super teams. Because there's going to be teams that just give up. Tanking is a loaded word, but tanking is now a strategy. And it's a strategy because of this. You're never going to get to this by being mediocre, by having B-plus players. You've got to have a couple A's. You've got to have a couple transcendent players. At least one. Okay? And I'm a diehard Washington. I grew up Bullets. Now they're the Wizards. I had season tickets as a kid, and I'm just dying with the Durant thing because he's from D.C. And they never got on the list. They never even got on the list. They never had a chance. His hometown team. So, anyone have an answer? What do you do about the teams that have no chance? Now, here's the thing about the NBA too. When you have a team that has no chance, like the Sixers the past few years, you know what? They're doing great at the box office. Why? Because there's other teams that have these guys. People want to see these guys. They don't care about the home team. Now they've got a good home team, so it's selling out that way. But you see all the factors at play here. So the overriding question of all this little soapbox is, should sports law override team management decisions that create competitive inequities? I don't have a right or wrong answer. That's for you to decide. But we have to come up with something, because sports will fail. Sports will fail if cities die out. I'm sorry, if teams die out without talent. Okay? You may think it's great. You've got these super teams. And if Russell Westbrook goes to LA with Paul George next year, then we'll have another super team. Yeah.
I feel like these super teams are creating like the best era of the sport. So it's not really
Are or are not? Are.
Like, so I feel like it's not really losing the integrity of the game, and since it's like the best basketball that's being played, more people are gonna watch it.
Right?
So it's not real like I don't see the viewership or the league or anything like that. It's gonna completely decline.
So you wouldn't do anything about it?
Personally, no. I don't think so.
What do you think about the bad teams?
Now I think seeing what Philadelphia has done, it kind of makes it, you could want to see if like other teams can do that, if they're as good as Sam Hinkie was.
Okay.
I feel like it kind of makes it interesting now.
So you could really envision a bunch of super teams and a bunch of tankers. And what kind of league would that be?
I don't know, but I mean, if it's like the best basketball that's being played, I don't really.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole tanking thing's a little overstated.
Uh-huh.
In any sport, you have maybe 1/3 of the league is really bad. So who cares if it's one half if the other half is really good?
Okay.
You know, I mean, look at football. The Browns have always been terrible. They're not trying to be that bad. They're just that bad. And, if you look at baseball, the Reds, the Pirates over the years, awful teams. So, I mean, you're always going to have them. It's just a part of the game.
But you haven't had them in a way that Sam Hinkie's had them, right?
I mean, I think the 76ers are a bit of an anomaly.
Right. But I think they're going to, I think the Browns, I think they're going to trend. I think that's going to be a trend. Now, is that okay with everyone? Okay. But I think that is going to be a trend because the Browns are doing it. They're amassing draft picks. They're stinking on purpose for the future. And in some ways, I'm like, okay, good, because their past ways they've stunk their other way. So, but we're seeing a transformation in sports, in part because what we talk about. Commissioners are, you read the quote, they're kind of hands-off. We may be teaching a class like this in 2-3 years, and now it's all changed. Commissioners have become hands-on. Okay, so we've had the era of hands-on with Bowie Kuhn and David Stern. We're now in the era of hands-off. We'll see if it has a correction point. Nick.
I don't think the super teams are what's causing the tanking. I think the Sixers were going to be the worst team in the league, whether the Warriors or the Heat, or whoever had a super team. So I think that was just tanking as just a strategy based on the fact
Right, probably
that the Warriors failed.
whoever was going to be the better teams, they were going to do that, right?
So I think those are two issues. I think super teams is fine because it's compelling. And I think the draft is what rewards the failing. I mean, the only other way to change it is to change the lottery odds so it's less likely, but then the worst teams might get, the 10th pick and just stink forever. So I think that would discourage tanking, but it doesn't really solve the problems of teams being bad. Again, like Jake said, that's pretty inevitable. There's always going to be the bottom of the barrel. Whether they have 10 wins or 5 wins, they're still lacking.
But again, you can be bad with NBA level players that just aren't that good, or you can be bad with not even NBA level players, because you're giving up the season to get that pick. Right.
I was kind of thinking of this on from a player's point of view. I was kind of wondering if the union should get involved at all.
Right. That's the other.
There are built-in things in the system, like the salary cap, that are meant to prevent these things. And the way teams like the Warriors are circumventing this is they're taking less salary because they know they're going to get the rest in endorsements. And so you're getting great players like Brandt and Steph Curry taking less money, and I think it's hurting the marginal players that are on the fringes. I mean, the NBA is at a bit of an anomaly right now because of all the money that just came in.
Yeah.
But eventually, you're going to see Kevin Durant making $25 million when he could be making $35 million, and that's going to affect those bench players when they go to get a contract for $5 million, and an owner's going to say, "Well, 25% of what Kevin Durant makes? No way."
Right.
In reality, if he was making $40 million, that'd only be less than 10%.
So what can the union do? What could they do?
I mean, it's a tough balance because at the same time, Durant could choose to go to Oklahoma City. He was drafted there, and he had no choice but
Right.
to play there. And then you're sort of, if you tell him he can't go somewhere, you're restricting his ability to seek a job that he wants. I mean, it's a tough question.
No, it's a good one. I mean, again, now put yourself, we've talked about league and team and union, now put yourself in the agent. As an agent, what do you want your guy to do? Because as an agent, you're going to make less money for Durant if he goes to Golden State versus staying in Oklahoma, but as you said, marketing and other income. But agents are really the gateways to these players, and agents have to be the one advising on these decisions. And so much of this is really dominated by agents talking to agents, which again, they're allowed to collude. So as an agent, you've got to decide, is it best for your client to be with this sort of super group and take less money? And could it affect things down the road? I've seen this in sports a lot. I've seen players that take less, primarily in football, where they take less saying, the sort of the management credo is like, just, we've got to sign all these other guys, just, be good to us. And then a player will see them signing other guys for top dollar. And then you got problems. You got upset players, you've got hurt feelings, you got feeling people were lied to and misled. This is tough. And sometimes agents bring me in on consulting stuff. A couple years ago, for those who follow the Seattle Seahawks, this kid, Cam Chancellor, so a few years ago he took this contract, was pretty good, not great, but he was the first one of that group. So then the Seahawks signed Earl Thomas, and they signed Richard Sherman, and they signed Michael Bennett, and all of a sudden these guys are getting top dollar. They're not getting kind of the discount deal that Cam got. And Cam went nuts. And he's very close to all those players, like best friends. And he actually sat out in the season and finally came back. But that's a problem. So everything you do has a reaction. Whether you're an agent, whether you're a team, whether you're a league, people are noticing. That's the way they do things. Okay. And people are noticing Adam Silver allowing this and even saying it drives interest. So when future superstars are seeing that, when Paul George and Russell Westbrook are seeing that, when their agents are seeing that, when the Lakers are seeing that, Lakers have already been dinged for tampering with George. Yeah, they're going to make that happen. Because this commissioner's not going to step in. Yeah, they gave him a little $500,000 fine for tampering. So everything you do gets noticed. And you've got Magic Johnson now out with the Lakers. Man, he's going to be extremely aggressive. because he's seen it work with Miami, he's seen it work with Golden State, and he's like, that's how we're getting there. They're going to go draft, of course, with Lonzo Ball, but they're also going to be very aggressive, free agents. So this is not going away, and it's market driven. And I just, again, you have a feeling for the underdog, because if that happens to Oklahoma, they're done. They have to draft superstars and sign them. That's the only way. Other small teams. Okay, Milwaukee's got that superstar, the Greek guy. They have to re-sign him. If they don't, he's not staying there. So that's a unique aspect to the sport that the commissioner has, believe me, whatever he's saying in the media, they're talking about all the time. Okay, other sports, it really can't happen because you have so many players, right? The most recruited free agent in the history of football in modern times has been Peyton Manning, who 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, he was released by the Colts. He wasn't a free agent. They cut him because he had had some neck surgeries. But he had 23 teams after him, because you never see a quarterback get to free agency, a good one that's played a lot. And he did make a difference. Denver won a Super Bowl and went to 2 of them with him. Okay, that's rare in football because there's so many players. And they never get to free agency, the really good ones. Basketball's different. Basketball players have more power. They're able to create their own destinies more. When we talk about free agency and how we got there with collective bargaining, we'll examine why some sports have more power. Baseball too, players with more power. But again, more baseball players, harder to make huge changes in performance, team performance. Okay, so the Hinkie model seems to be working here in Philadelphia. If they become this transcendent team, they're already talking about, well, Embiid, he talks about anything. He's already talking about, well, when LeBron and them fall off, we'll be the team by then. It's pretty bold, but it may be true. And they'll do it homegrown, and they won't, they won't need the collusive aspects of free agency. Any other questions on this? Actually, was there someone talking about this, Sarah? Was there someone assigned to talk about this besides me? Super teams? I'm sorry. Yeah, I did all the talking. Anything else you want to add? Tell me your name, I'm sorry. Elizabeth, sorry. What is your personal feeling on this?
I don't know if I have a strong opinion about it.
Would you jump in? If you were commissioner?
Probably not yet.
See if it becomes a real trend?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find the product entertaining with these super teams?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I never paid attention to the NBA, but I watched the finals this year.
Yeah, again, Adam Silver has to deal with a lot lately, it seems, but this is something he's deferred. And I think so we are where Elizabeth said we are. We're going to watch. As I keep saying, the Lakers are poised to make themselves one of these next year. We may be with this super tier, and then everyone else. There are some points here that we have. The part of the thrill is to hold them up to the name, right? So when LeBron first signed with Miami, all of that discussion about, oh my God, they're only like 15-10. What's going on? That becomes a story in itself. The Relentless Watch. And I think that's always going to happen to the Warriors and Cavs. Like, what's wrong when they're not winning all the time? What's wrong? But we're always left with that question. Should we break them up? Next topic with this commissioner is offensive comments. This is really becoming a big topic in the age that we live in that's so divisive. With, starting at the top, where people make these comments, and now we have social media. Should a commissioner get involved? Whether it's players or owners. Who's talking about rocker and shot? Your name is?
Nick.
Nick, right? I'll let you start.
Mark shot on the Cincinnati Reds from 84 to 99. She was a bigot.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any way around that.
Racist, bigot, yeah.
Yeah, so one of her employees in 92, Tim Sabo, he was a team controller, he sued Schott and the Reds for wrongful termination. He alleged that during a previous lawsuit that limited partners brought against the Reds for an unwritten policy of not hiring black people, and he testified in that case saying that he agreed and opposed that policy, so he thought that he was fired because for opposing that policy. He ultimately lost the suit, but in a deposition for that suit, another team employee, Cal Levi, had said Schott used racial slurs to describe two black players, Dave Parker and Eric Davis, who were stars at that point for the Reds. Shortly after this, about a month after this deposition came out, Schott made some comments, or she defended her comments saying they were just in jest, but in the same interview, she said that Hitler was initially good for Germany, and she didn't understand why the word Jap was offensive to Japanese people. And then that same year, the New York Times reported that she had said that she, and this is a quote, rather have a trained monkey working for her, working for me, than a black person.
Uh-huh.
And that was all in 92. She continued that the next year. The MLB actually, Bud Selig, I believe was the at the time, convened a 4-member committee to investigate her. She was found that she did say this stuff, I guess, and she was fined $250,000, and she was suspended from day-to-day operations from the Reds for 93. And then in 94, she publicly stated that she didn't want her players to wear earrings because, quote, only fruits wear earrings. In 95, she kept going. Well, in 95, it wasn't quite as bad. During the season, the Reds were good. She said she wasn't going to bring Davey Johnson, the manager, back, even though they were really good. They ended up winning the division. She didn't bring him back. One of the reasons was because she didn't approve of Johnson living with his then fiance before marriage. And then in 96, she made insensitive comments following an opening day game where the umpire actually died on the field. She was criticized for that, and later on in that season, she made pro-Hitler comments, saying that he was good for Germany but went too far. So she was banned again, and for the rest of 96 through the 1998 season. But a few weeks after those comments, she apparently did an interview for SI and used a cartoonish Japanese accent when describing her meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan. Eventually in 99, she was facing another suspension, and she sold her majority stake in the Reds because of that, and she was in bad health, and the limited partners were going to oust her from ownership.
What would you do as commissioner with this? She's quite a peach, this woman.
I think you have to step in because you got players like Eric Davis and Dave Parker and other black players and minority players that are playing in the league, and it's kind of hostile to them. And it's also hostile to the fans who are watching. There's kids watching. There's other young people. These people are role models in a lot of ways. So for her to make these comments publicly, think the league has stepped in and said you can't do that and set a precedent saying we're not going to take this kind of inoffensive speech or this offensive speech, and we're not going to, allow even owners to do that.
So what did they do with her?
They suspended her a bunch of times, twice, once for a year, 2.5 years.
Right.
From day-to-day operations, and then obviously eventually she was essentially pushed out from her health and from
Right.
incidents where they were kind of done with the partners, because the limited partners had sued her before, on the basis of her being kind of totally bigoted toward players. And during that time, she was one of the more vocal owners of leagues, because a lot of owners are not, they don't say much.
Right.
She said a little too much.
Right. All right, so again, league versus team, we talk about that dynamic, a strange reaction here because, first of all, we have to remind everyone that owners pay and hire the commissioner, but the commissioner has to discipline owners. So in a unique twist, the commissioner has to discipline ownership for being racist. Obviously, she's a very offensive person, offensive owner, and the commissioner acted. I don't think you'll get a lot of disputes about whether there was a need to act. You can raise the question, though, first of all, hey, if you're her, first of all, hey, you work for me, and then, of course, First Amendment, which those things were raised by her side, but he suspended her, Bud Selig, the commissioner, multiple times, and just noting it. I mean, I think that this is something where you have a commissioner that's going to get involved with things like moral integrity. And we talk about it with players a lot and whether it's the right thing to do. I think the same question has to be asked about ownership. Ultimately, like I keep saying, these are stewards of the game. Your owner is handling a multi-billion-dollar now asset and being the face and voice of it. This is a bad look, a really bad look. So, again, with all these things, you sort of have to put yourself in the shoes of both sides. Commissioner has to act as precedent. What if someone says something even worse? How do we deal with this? She was, as you may expect, a very, very unpopular owner among ownership, maybe the most hated in the group. So this was a popular decision. But, put yourself in the shoes of commissioner now and a popular owner. Pick a name, Mark Cuban, whoever. If he were to say something that was very offensive, would there be the same reaction? Nothing happens in a vacuum. You have a woman like this who's kind of disliked by her peers. She's going to get suspended. Now, the one thing you can't do at this point, we're going to get to the Donald Sterling case next, take the franchise away. So this is a setup for the Sterling case. Is there anything that you would say, what she said, and you heard the litany of comments, where you would actually take the franchise away? Anyone? And asked another way, does anyone think suspension and fine is too soft on her? Too soft punishment. Anyone? No? Would anyone have taken, if you could, taken her rights to the franchise away? Now, she was kicked out of the coming to games, but she obviously still had ownership. Yeah, right.
I mean, you could find her to the point where it's just not feasible for her to continue being that would be a way to go about it.
Okay. Yeah, as ownership goes, especially this one was not a comparatively wealthy one. So fine to the point of her, well, maybe fine to the point of her wanting to make a deal. But again, these are all decisions that come up. You don't expect your owner to make these comments. It's a bad look for the sport. It's a bad look for you. It's a bad look for the team. It's a bad look for your game. Players obviously note it. Now, did she ever come out with any mea culpas and sorries, apologies, all that?
I think so.
Because I never saw that
I
either.
think she kind of just, like especially with the comments about Eric Davis and Dave Parker, she just kind of brushed them off the night and it's just a joke. I don't think she really had much, I don't think she really felt sorry about what the things she said.
Yeah. Okay, so pretty obvious the commissioner has to act, did act, but again, everything is precedent. So as we think about this and we head towards Donald Sterling's case, this was just a fine for some pretty heinous comments, a suspension and fine. There wasn't a thought of doing something drastic like pulling the franchise, which we are about to see. All right, we'll take a break. We'll get back to the Clippers and Donald Sterling. Before we get to kind of the next step of the shot, dealing with offensive comments, which is obviously the Sterling case, let's compare it to player comments. So we have a guy like Rocker. Are you speaking about that as well? Yeah, so we talked about owner comments, but here's a player. Same issue, kind of the racist, bigoted language. How do you deal with that?
John Rocker, he was a closer for the Atlanta Braves, from I think in '98 to around 2002. He didn't have a long career, but he was pretty good in '99. Anyway, so during a story for Sports Illustrated, Rocker said about the city of New York and the Yankees, quote, "I retire first. It's the most hectic, nerve-wracking city. Imagine having to take the 7 train to the ballpark looking like you're riding through Beirut, next to some kid with purple hair, next to some queer with AIDS, right next to some dude who just got out of jail for the 4th time, right next to some 20-year-old mom with 4 kids. It's depressing. The biggest thing I don't like about New York are the foreigners. You can walk an entire block in Times Square and not hear anybody speaking English. Asians, Koreans, and Vietnamese, and Indians, and Russians, and Spanish people, and everything up there. How the hell did they get into this country?" So he kind of hit every person.
Yeah, there's not many that he left out.
And during that interview, the interviewer, Jeff Perlman, he said...
This was Sports Illustrated, right?
Yeah, Sports Illustrated. He said that Rocker spat on Georgia State Route 40 toll machine and mocked Asian women during their interview. He also called his teammate Randall Simon, who's from Curacao of African descent, a fat monkey. Rocker apologized, in quotes, I guess, for his comments. He met with Hank Aaron, who's one of the best baseball players ever, black player.
He was also Braves management, yeah.
Yeah.
Team management, yeah.
And the former Atlanta mayor, Andrew Young. They also, before a game at Shea Stadium, they showed a videotape apology on Shea Stadium, which is obviously in the Braves. So the Braves visited the Mets, and it was kind of a really bad situation. There was police and riot gear for when he came into the game. There was extra police presence in the dugout because they didn't know what was going to happen. They actually limited the beer sales too.
Yeah.
Because they really didn't know what was going to happen. Nothing happened, but Bud Selig did decide to suspend Rocker without pay for the rest of the '99 season and into 28 games into the 2000 season, but on appeal that was reduced to 14 games without a spring training.
Okay, so again, the difference between owners and players is owners don't have a union because they probably don't need one. They're the bosses of the commissioner. The players have the union, and for those who've been following sports for a while, you'll know that the Major League Baseball Players Union is the strongest, seem to have a win everywhere they go, and this was a win. So everything Rocker said, hit every group he could, debased every ethnicity he could. Got the suspension, and guess what? The union got it reduced from what to what?
It was the rest of the '99 season. I think this was around near the end of that season.
Yeah.
Maybe like 60, 70 games. And then the first 28 games of the 2000 season, so that got reduced to 14 games. So still pretty long suspension, just not as long.
Right. But just amazing that it did get reduced. But it just shows you that for everything, there's a visceral reaction to all of these comments. but then you get in an arbitration in a legal setting, and again, we're sort of putting ourselves in the shoes of both sides. What do you think Rocker's lawyer is saying in an arbitration defending his comments to get a reduction of suspension? What is Rocker's lawyer saying? How could he defend this? Union lawyer. What's the only thing he could look at? What's the P word? Precedent. Now, I don't know what precedent there was, but there had to be some reason that the arbitrator said, as bad as this was, it doesn't deserve the suspension it got. So maybe there was some hateful language before, and maybe it got this kind of suspension. But after all of this, again, difference from Marge Schott, no union to represent her and get it reduced. He got it reduced. Now, it's still, as you said, a pretty good suspension. But you think something like this, you can't walk into an arbitration and get that reduced. But he did. So again, as a lawyer, you have to represent some hateful clients. And this is a guy that they went in, and probably my only guess is they found some precedent. And again, it's the same thing with pick whoever's, turns your stomach. What Ray Rice did on video. I'm sure, in a way, when they got the suspension overturned, not the 2-game suspension, but the bigger one after the video, the lawyers obviously went in and said, well, wait a minute. The NFL's never given more than 2 games for domestic violence. The only difference is now we have a video, so why should that change? When you're arguing for a cause, find your precedent. And in sports law, it's very specific. Every situation's different, but you have to look at what happened in the past. John Rocker, hateful, offensive comments, debasing every ethnic group he could think of. Suspended, but reduced on appeal, arbitration. Okay, so as we compare these ridiculous comments from both player and owner, the owners ended up obviously being longer and more sustained and harsher, in part because owner didn't really have an appeal route. Player did. Okay, thanks. Back to the ownership. This one got tremendous coverage a couple years ago. I think it's been a few years now. It's funny, I was in LA this summer. I'm just walking down the street and I look up and there's a building on Wilshire Avenue and it says Law Offices of Donald Sterling. So he's still in business as a lawyer, and he is a lawyer and he sues people a lot. But he made some questionable comments on tape, and that led to this scandal. We'll talk about Adam Silver. We've talked about him with the super teams. He was just on the job, right? Just got the job, and this happened. Who's talking about this? Yes, your name is? Jarrell.
So Don Sterling, he's an American attorney, businessman, and he's a former owner of the LA Clippers. He bought the San Diego Clippers in 1981 and owned them until 2014, whenever he made some racist remarks, which prompted him selling the team. I also thought it's important to know that he does have a history of discrimination from members of his own front office and also from the federal government and some of the commercial real estate properties that he owns.
So he was a real estate developer, and the discrimination was in sort of the tenant relationships that.
I'm not familiar with like landlord discrimination, but saying you have rooms for certain groups or rooms for not other ethnic groups.
So okay, so a history of racist practices.
So in April of 2014, TMZ Sports, they broke a story where his mistress had recorded a 15-minute long video who happened to be Black and Hispanic. And he was upset about an Instagram post of her, Magic Johnson. He said some of the following quotes: "It bothers me a lot that you broadcasters associated with Black people. Do you have have to. You can sleep with them, you can bring them in, you can do whatever you want. What I ask you is not to promote that. Don't bring him to my games. You have to have yourself with black people. Don't put him in front of Magic Instagram for the world to see. Don't bring him to any of my games. So after this, the league got one of it, and Adam Silver strongly condemned him. And this was also an interesting plot twist because the Clippers were in the middle of a playoff series as well.
Yeah, the timing was amazing because the Clippers were a good team and in the playoffs, traditionally a bad team under his ownership. Go ahead.
So Adam Silver, he disavowed statements completely. He said they're truly offensive and disturbing. But he also said the stealing would be afforded due process. So with that due process, Adam Silver made one of the harsh decisions in professional sports history, and he banned Don Sterling from the NBA for life and fined him $2.5 million, which is the maximum amount under the NBA constitutional bylaws. And then subsequently, the commissioners voted him out of ownership, and made him sell the team. And that was a long and complex legal battle as well, because another twist of stories is during this time he was fighting prostate cancer and diagnosed with dementia as well. So he was mentally unfit to handle the team. So then his estranged wife was given trusteeship of the team, and then it was eventually sold for $2 billion
Right.
to Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer.
Okay. So, nice description, Jarrell, of what happened. Listen, there are a lot to unpack here. First of all, you're talking about a secretly, and then the question is illegally or not, recorded conversation with his mistress, who's shown here with him. So that's the first thing, right? So he's at her house or whatever, and she's recording secretly. That's something for one of your other courses here about whether that's legal or not. As I understood it back then, California, somehow it's legal. You don't need both parties' consent to a recorded conversation, where other states you do. Is that correct from what you know, Jerome?
Yes. I think in Pennsylvania that you can't have like one party recording conversation.
But in California, you can?
So,
Yeah. So we get past that hurdle, and what's her name? Vivian or something.
Vivian, but it's a made-up name. So I'm not
It's a made-up name. It's like a soap opera. The mistress, has recorded him saying, don't bring your black friends around, don't show me, don't hang out, whatever it is. And it caused a stir at a very emotional time, because you have the new ownership, new commissioner, and you have the playoffs. So if you remember back then, I think teams were kind of wearing their jerseys inside and out. Players were talking about boycotting the game. Again, the players, Chris Paul and others, kind of came out with solidarity statements. Even the coaches, Doc Rivers, were saying this is ridiculous, what's going on here. And you had Silver had to make a call. So now imagine yourself, your new commissioner, this happens. Here's the problem with all these things. I keep coming back to its precedent. Now, these are not comments like shot, right? These are not comments like rocker. These are not good. These are bad. But if it matters, there's no N-word, and it's a secret recording in a private setting. Now, even with all that, the commissioner goes to the max for the punishment. If you remember, if you were following this back then, before owners all seemed to get together on this, I remember it was Mark Cuban, who I respect a lot, always seems to say sensical things. When he said, there was a report that he said, I don't know what we do here, we don't want to go down this slippery slope. And then it just seemed like that comment, he walked back. because he was getting pressure like, we got to be all in one on this. We got to be 100% on this. When I saw Mark Cuban say that, it resonated because, as a lawyer, you're like, wait a minute. What happens the next time? Do we want to go into the history of all these owners and whether they've said a bad word in the past, whether they've secret recorded, whether they have any skeletons in their closet? Wow, we could be taking away a lot of franchises. That's something I think that was kind of in the hysteria, the emotion of the moment, these racially charged comments in a predominantly black league, obviously they had to deal with, but again, it was the emotion. So as Jarrell said, you had the highest fine ever, and this whole idea that we vote to remove the franchise. Something that was not done with Marge Schott, where ownership, again, this is the ultimate commissioner power. Because in the Constitution, you have the same language you have in the Major League Agreement and all these sports. Commissioner, when all else fails, you have the two words, best interest. So Jarrell, you can clarify, but I believe in the agreement, the NBA Constitution, Commissioner Silver could go to ownership and use the best interest power if he had a unanimous vote to terminate ownership. Does that sound right?
I think from what I read, that he banned him from life and banned him for life, and then banned him to the max. And then the owners themselves voted to remove him.
Okay, so it was ownership who obviously have the power with the commissioner to remove him. So the commissioner's power extended to a fine, maximum discipline, and I would think a recommendation to ownership that they do this. The Mark Cuban thing that I mentioned came out early. Then, as I said, walked back, and he's in line with the other 30. It was a 30-0 unanimous vote to remove ownership. Now that takes a lot of lawyers to get that through, because they knew Sterling was going to sue, which he did. And then Jarrell mentioned the other thing to unpack here. He was sick. And in his physical exams about his prostate, there were dementia issues. So according to his own trust, the Sterling Trust, if there were dementia issues, the trust reverts to his wife, Shelley. Shelley Sterling didn't really want to own the Clippers. So armed with this news from the NBA saying we want to remove the franchise, she had a couple choices. On behalf of him, who still thinks he should be running it and doesn't have dementia and all that, she decides, she has choice to fight it, and we could still be in court today, Sterling versus the NBA, or do what she did, got out. And boy, did she get out, because we had the most unique sale in the history of sports. She opened up bidding to the LA Clippers, a marquee franchise that had gotten good now in the second biggest market in the country, in a league that is signing huge deals with TNT and ESPN at that time, in a league that was raising its popularity, and all of a sudden she has this crown jewel franchise she's selling. Oh my God, the bids came in on napkins. You got to understand, usually these sales take like years and due diligence and ownership. So Steve Ballmer, the number 2 at Microsoft, he's got $30 billion on his couch. Guy's one of the richest guys in the world. He wants in. As someone who studies the business of sports, this was the most amazing transaction in history. Do you know what the highest franchise sale in the NBA at that time was? Anyone? $510 million. That was the highest. $500 million. The Sixers were sold a year before that. 400-something million. Steve Ballmer bought the team for $2 billion. Oh my God. Where do you get that? Where do you come up with that number? And says to Shelley Sterling, and you'll keep your front row seats, you'll be a fixture. Donald Sterling is sitting back with prostate cancer trying to get approval from the doctors that he can own the team and sue the league, and she sells it. $2 billion, which he has in cash, right? Magic was trying to buy it. Oprah was in on buying it. All these private equity companies. I mean, it was an amazing 5 days. Basically, in 5 days, she sold it. You have to understand, when a franchise sells for $2 billion, when the highest franchise before that was 1/4 of that number, that is an amazing return. And we just had a sale last week, I think. The Houston Rockets, more than $2 billion. It set a new floor. Just like that. Owners in every sport were celebrating. Every sport. Especially the NFL. They say, well, NBA can get $2 billion. What can we get? Okay. They found the right buyer. It was the right time. It was all these worlds colliding. And all of a sudden, in a span of days, you went from these incredible comments to a $2.5 million fine, to a 30-0 vote from ownership to remove the franchise, to a mentally incompetent status, to a wife who wanted to sell the team, to a team sale at 4 times the number for the standard. An amazing sequence. Beyond the business aspects of this, the incredible sale that happened, the legal aspects still resonate because to me, we've got a problem now. This is my opinion. We have a problem. There is going to be an owner in the NBA, in the NFL, in baseball, in hockey, in soccer, that is going to say a lot worse things than Sterling said on that tape. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. It's going to be on a cell phone video. It's going to be out there. Someone's going to say he said it or she said it. The precedent now is take the franchise away from them. Oh my God, we can't do that. What if an NBA owner is caught saying the N-word? Sterling didn't say the N-word. We got precedent. Okay? I'm a lawyer. I said it at the time. I said it on TV. I don't like this because we're just caught up in the hysteria of this because it's the playoffs and Chris Paul's they're saying calling for a boycott. This is a problem. Now, Silver was very popular for this. But what happens the next time? They can't keep taking away franchises. So I think sometimes you want to be... I love Adam Silver as a commissioner. I do. I think he's progressive. I think he's player-friendly while keeping the owners happy. But I think in that situation, he was more concerned with being popular than doing what was going to stand for a long time. These comments are bad, but they're not as bad as they can be. There's going to be worse. There's going to be worse. You can't just keep taking away franchises. Now, as I keep saying, nothing happens in a vacuum. Remember I talked about that with the Cubs and Faye Vincent. Everyone loved the Cubs. Everyone didn't like Faye Vincent. Talked about with Schott. No one liked her. Okay? No one liked Sterling. Racist for many years. No one likes him. That's part of this. We get it. But I go back to Mark Cuban's comments that came out and then were pulled back. Slippery slope, huge slippery slope here. What is going to happen the next time someone says something racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted as an owner? Well, we've got the Donald Sterling precedent. Well, Donald Sterling precedent, wow, that was, someone's going to argue that was in the hysteria of the moment. Okay. We are in a new age, of course. This TMZ is breaking these stories, right? Maybe the biggest stories for those 2 years in sports, Ray Rice and Donald Sterling, were broken by TMZ. Not ESPN, not Fox, not ABC, NBC, CBS. TMZ. That's telling. We're going to see these things happen. Cell phone videos, whatever it is. We've got some alarming precedent. And got to be wary of it. Okay, anything else on Sterling? Like I said, his law practice is still going. I don't even know how his health is or...
He's still alive. He reconciled with his wife.
Oh, he did?
For tax purposes.
Yeah.
So, I guess he's doing all right.
Well, I don't know how much of that $2 billion he got, right? Probably a lot.
He had to pay a huge tax on it. That was one of the lawsuits.
Okay.
He would have sold the company, but he wouldn't want to do it his own way because you have to pay a huge capital gains tax if he just sold it outright the way that he wanted to.
Does anyone know, has there been another franchise except the Houston Rockets last week sold for that kind of number? Has an NFL team gone for more than $2 billion? I don't think so. Now maybe, yeah, obviously the Premier League soccer teams, but astounding. And again, that's the wealth that we haven't seen in sports ownership that's coming, right? We haven't seen Microsoft, Google, Amazon, that kind of wealth before. No one has those cash reserves, no individual, until the time and place we're living in now. Okay, so you have Jeff Bezos from Amazon. He could buy any of these. He could buy the leagues, right? He could buy these leagues. Forget teams. So this kind of wealth will allow for these kind of quick transfers in times of crisis. Where in the past, you wouldn't have a Steve Ballmer sitting around with billions in his bank account. So that's a massive disruptor as well. The new media, the new digital age having this incredible cash reserves, some of these billionaires. I mean, imagine if you're selling a team and you have one of these guys. You can charge whatever you want, right? If you're selling anything, and one of these guys, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're interested. Oh my God. They haven't capitalization that just, no limits. Okay. Good job. Any questions on this? People agree with me? Is there a feeling that this precedent can be talked away if this happens again? I mean, these NBA owners, I'll get to you in a second, when they voted 30-0 to kick him out, they've known he's a racist for 30 years, some of these guys. They never kicked him out before. They've known they knew about these real estate practices. So if I'm Donald Sterling's lawyer, I would say, well, what are you kicking him out for? Because you've known he's a racist for 30 years. What are you exactly kicking him out for? For comments to a mistress on tape? Really? Yeah.
And yeah, there's something like shady about now that he's been caught. Now he gets the franchise taken from him. But unless every player that's ever walked through those doors has known about all of that also, then is that really the guy that you want heading your franchise and setting an example for the players who play for the team that he owns? Because these owners, maybe not like directly, but they are kind of like a role model, and they do act on behalf of the league. So probably can't walk back from the precedent that has been set, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
That's a good point. Because as I said, Silver is that commissioner that seems to really, really care about players. Now, is it lip service when he's really just trying to please the owners? We don't know, but there's a real element to the way he commissions, if that's the right word, that he has the player's heart. Where you don't get that from other commissioners in football, hockey, baseball. And so, is it Pat?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Pat's comment about the Clippers players is a good one. I mean, these are guys, and again, you can't discount Chris Paul being the head of the union and being a very vocal player, that maybe one of the most respected players in the league as a leader off the court. And as you related to that, I did note that coaches disavow themselves from the ownership too. The Clipper coaches. Yeah.
Do you think the same result would have been reached in other sports, like the NFL, for example?
You know, it's a great question. You think about like a Jerry Jones, who's kind of a Southern homespun joke maker. I would think he said some of this, some kind of sexist, maybe misogynist stuff, drinking at a bar, whatever. Yeah, I don't think it would happen. Who knows? I do think, you've got issues with race, you've got issues with past histories. But again, I go back to the point, David Stern was commissioner all those years, tolerated this. This behavior's not new. That behavior was not new. Of course, when I think about this, I think about our president too. What if he was a team owner? He was a team owner, right? A president owned a team in the United States Football League back in the day, New Jersey Generals. He couldn't say the stuff he's saying now as a president. If he said the stuff after Charlottesville and he was somehow a team owner, what would happen there? Everything kind of comes back, just seems like. Okay, and a final comment here is these commissioners have to be balancing so many issues. Player revolt, hysteria of the moment. What happens next time? Bring Mark Cuban back in line. We can't go in this 29-1. We have to have 30-0. And one thing that just seems to happen a lot is that the commissioner that doesn't seem to get a lot of this right somehow, Commissioner Goodell in the NFL, I'll say this because we're here, not a lawyer. Other commissioners are lawyers. Sometimes you just have to have that critical thinking about precedent. Now, Silver's a lawyer. He's got to be thinking about precedent here, but again, he decided to weigh the hysteria and what could have happened at that moment, and these players walking into their clubhouse with that kind of owner versus precedent. We'll see what happens. Okay, to our Jewish friends, have a nice holiday, and we will get to the next topic next week. We still have to deal with steroids. When we talk about steroids, I want you to think about what you would do as commissioner, because again, there are so many ways to enhance performance beyond pills and creams and ingesting things.